Good morning, everyone. Greetings from New Jersey. Thank you for joining us today. In today's session, we're going to be covering duplicates in the HubSpot Salesforce integration. So the primary thing that we're going to be talking about is what are duplicates. We'll spend very little time on that because I'm pretty sure you know. And then we're going to go into how are duplicates created in the HubSpot Salesforce integration and why is this such a problem, and how to fix that. So I have a lot of resources online about how to solve the duplicate issue, how to manage duplicates using InCycle, manually, what have you. So what I really want to focus on today is explaining the problem and providing you with those resources of how do we fix this manually, how do we fix it with a tool, so you're equipped moving forward. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, I'm Lauren Ryan, founder and chief marketing nerd at Coastal Consulting. We are a very small agency, just me and my sister. We focus on the HubSpot Salesforce integration, and our main value prop is that we create so much content to help people like you master the HubSpot Salesforce integration, and we're really teachers. So we come alongside you and teach you how this integration works, why it's not working for you, and also help fix the integration. So today, like I said, we're going to cover understanding dupes, options for deduplicating records. I'm going to go live and show you some HubSpot Salesforce scenarios on how duplicates got created and what I would do to fix it in the future. And then I'll talk about what comes next in our live training series. So first, what is a duplicate record? A duplicate record is more than one record in a CRM that represents the same thing. So what that means is we could have two contacts like Betsy, and we could also have Betsy and have two records. It's the same person, maybe with a personal email and a work email, but they represent the same person. Same thing for companies. We could have Acme and Acme Inc. Those are the same thing. That's the same company, but we have two records that are denoting it, which creates challenges when it comes to reporting, personalization, and also just storage costs of how much you're paying to have records in your CRM. So how are duplicate records created in this integration? I'm going to go over 3 points here. One, Salesforce Leads and Contacts sync to HubSpot Contacts. So for the other objects in the integration, like deals and opportunities, it's really obvious how they integrate. But for Leads and Contacts in Salesforce, they both map to one contact object in HubSpot. So that can get a little confusing because some teams will create multiple leads in Salesforce for one record and only have one contact for them. So just know that when you're syncing Salesforce Leads and Contacts to HubSpot, you're syncing Leads and Contacts to the HubSpot contact object. Another challenge with duplicates in this integration is the duplicate rules are managed differently in HubSpot and Salesforce. So HubSpot duplicate rules are finite, meaning you can't change them. This is what HubSpot defines as a duplicate, and that's what's going to be treated as a duplicate in HubSpot. Now, Salesforce duplicate rules are flexible, meaning your Salesforce admin can control what those duplicate rules look like, and they can control who can override them. So in HubSpot, contacts are deduplicated by email address, meaning you can't create multiple records for the same email, and duplicate companies are identified by their company domain. In Salesforce, the standard rules can be looked up online as far as what they include, but usually accounts will customize those rules. So the admin will define what is a duplicate in your account, what does that look like? Finally, like I said, HubSpot will not allow two contacts to have the same email address. When you try to create a record in HubSpot that already has an existing email, it's going to look like this. You'll see the error message. This email address already belongs to a contact in your database. It'll link it down here, and you can't go forward. But in Salesforce, if you try to create a record, you'll see this similar records exist message that says, hey, there are duplicates with this email address, but then you can just click save again, and it creates anyway. However, as an admin, you can control that. You can say don't allow override, but the default allows an override. So if your admin has not gone in and updated your matching and duplicate rules in Salesforce, they can just click save again, ignore that, and move on. Also, integrations will auto override that. Like if you have an API integration or something like that where the checking for duplicates is not built in, it'll just auto override and push it on through. So these are 3 key ways that you can have those duplicates created. The Leads and Contacts syncing to HubSpot Contacts. Duplicate rules are finite and Salesforce duplicate rules are flexible. And HubSpot will not allow two contacts to have the same email address, and Salesforce will. And whenever that happens, HubSpot will still have that one contact record, and whatever is most recently updated in Salesforce will sync through to HubSpot. So on the questions, whenever y'all registered for this, I asked, like, what do you want to learn in this session? Someone said that they're often seeing their HubSpot data deleted by Salesforce. And so what's likely happening is that there's multiple contacts or leads and contacts for the same person in Salesforce that has the same email address. And so whichever one of those records is updated most recently in Salesforce is going to sync back to HubSpot. So let's say this contact right here was a customer. We had all of this data on them, like years and years of history. They're a customer, their lead status is customer, all of that. But then we have a new lead created in Salesforce, and that syncs back to HubSpot, and it wipes everything clean. It's a brand new lead. Everything is erased in HubSpot because all of the data that prefer Salesforce or always use Salesforce as the field mapping rule for this lead has overwritten everything that's in HubSpot. So whenever that happens, we then need to solve this issue essentially, because it's going to sync to whatever's most recently updated in Salesforce, and that's going to wipe all your HubSpot data. So that ruins reporting, personalization, because then you're talking to somebody like they're a lead when they're actually a customer. So something to note. Now, clearly it's a challenge of the integration, but it doesn't have to be. So what are my options? Essentially, you have 3 options. You can prevent them, you can monitor them, and you can deduplicate the records. So what I really want to talk about is how to prevent them and how to monitor them, because how you deduplicate them, again, there's a lot of resources, and I'll give you those at the end. But what we really want to know is, why is this happening? How is this happening? And what are the specific scenarios? So then you can take that to your account and say, okay, in my account, what are the scenarios that I'm seeing? If I look at specific duplicates, you can kind of follow the trail of what happened for them to get here. So you can then work backwards in your account to prevent this from happening. Because of course we want to fix the issue, we want to clean it up, but we also kind of want to stop the water from running. If you're cleaning up a spill, you clean from the top rather than the bottom, right? So we want to go back to the beginning. So how do we prevent duplicates? There are 3 things that I recommend. 1 is requiring the website URL for Salesforce accounts. Whenever you create an account in Salesforce, you are not required to put the URL in on the Salesforce account by default. So what you can do is require that as a Salesforce admin. Some admins are resistant to this, because that means you have to have the URL whenever you import all of your Salesforce companies, or whenever your sales rep go to import a company. It's an extra field to fill out. And just like marketers are like, we don't want to add another field to the form because it'll reduce submission rates. A lot of admins don't want to add more work for their sales team because it'll reduce the amount they actually use the tool, right? That's fair. But if you want this integration to work well, we need to have that website URL. There's a few ways to do it. You can use a formula field to extract the website URL from email addresses associated to the account. There's different solutions that we've built for that in the past, which you can see in our integration course. Or you can just require that people manually input it. So before you import them into HubSpot, I would recommend putting your URL in your Salesforce accounts. If you already have the integration, this is such a pain, but go ahead and export a report of all of your accounts that are missing a website URL with the owner assigned, and create a task for your Salesforce owners to say, hey, I need you to go through, here's your 20 accounts that don't have a URL. Please go update it, or update it in the spreadsheet and I'll import it for you. So it's important to have that URL, and make sure that the website URL property is syncing to company domain name on the company record in HubSpot. So whenever I go through and screen share, I'll show you where that is. Now, 2, don't allow override for Salesforce duplicate rules. This one's super important. And again, admins will push back on this, especially if it's an admin that's used to working in an org that has leads. So if we're used to creating multiple leads for all of the new opportunities that come in, obviously we don't want to override duplicates, because that's how we get our new leads, right? Well, you might want to change that. We have a resource at the end of how to start using an opportunity-based inquiry model instead of using the lead object at all, which if you're active in the HubSpot Salesforce community, there's a big debate on, do we use leads, do we not? I say no, and I also provide you a lot of reasons why. So check that out in the resources section. If you haven't seen it already, the PDF of these slides is in the comments. So you can download that and see the resources slide at the end for all of the things I'm referencing. So in conclusion, don't allow override for Salesforce duplicate rules. Have your admins set something that says they cannot override this. Once we already have an email in the system, that is our email. Don't allow duplicates. Again, check with people at your org before you do that. If you have admin rights, don't just go do that today. There's a lot of trickle down implications. Like if you have integrations or other tools depending on this, this needs to be a collective system admin decision, but it is important and it will make your life easier with this integration. Now, the 3rd way to prevent duplicates, don't allow net new leads for emails belonging to existing contacts. That's pretty much the same as number 2, but it's said explicitly. So Hope I wasn't unclear. Now, how do we monitor duplicates? There isn't a way that HubSpot or Salesforce waves you and says, hey, you have a duplicate issue, because it's kind of negative. Platforms don't like to bring you down, but you can subscribe to sync errors in the HubSpot Salesforce integration, and you can't subscribe to duplicates, which is unfortunate, but there's two ways that I recommend keeping an eye on this from an administrative perspective. One is reviewing duplicates in HubSpot regularly. So there's a manage duplicate section in HubSpot, which I'll show you when I screen share, that lets you see where your duplicates are for contacts and companies and manage them all on one screen. It's super helpful. I haven't seen a platform that has a better duplicate management tool than HubSpot for surfacing and managing duplicates within their own platform. Two is running a duplicate record report in Salesforce. I will show you this when I screen share. It's kind of clunky, but this is how you can look at duplicates from a holistic perspective in Salesforce. And three is going to be using a third-party duplicate tool to monitor duplicates. I recommend InCycle. I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, so these are the three options. We want to look in HubSpot, we want to look in Salesforce, and ideally we have a third-party tool that we're using on the side to make sure all of this is working well together. Now, we've got two options for deduplicating records. One is manually, and two is using a third-party tool. And also, you can use HubSpot Operations Hub to deduplicate records. The challenge is whenever you have the integration installed, that's not going to do it in Salesforce. So whenever you look at solutions online, and a lot of you, since you're here, have probably seen this challenge, is you'll see ways to solve this for HubSpot. You'll see ways to solve this for Salesforce. But how do you solve it when they're integrated? Because the challenge is in Salesforce, if you merge records and haven't changed the settings in HubSpot, you might just be deleting data in HubSpot. Then you've lost all of this data for your client. Or if you're merging companies in HubSpot, that's not doing it in Salesforce, because merging records in one system does not merge them in the other. Merging records in HubSpot does nothing to Salesforce, and merging records in Salesforce has the potential to delete a record in HubSpot. So you want to do this carefully. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk through some scenarios. So today I'm going to show you how to manually deduplicate and also show you how to identify some scenarios that are happening in your account, because I firmly believe that if you don't know why these are being created, you can't really fix it. You can clean it up, but I worked with a client once and she had over 20,000 duplicate records in her account. And so the team and I split them up amongst ourselves. We did a tracking sheet, kind of a competition of who can get the most every day. And we found that after 2 weeks of doing this, she had more than 20,000 duplicates. And so the issue that we had made, this was like 3 years ago, the mistake we'd made is we didn't look at why this was happening. We didn't fix it at the source. We just put in this competition of we're going to get the duplicates down. We're going to make this happen. But actually we didn't turn off the faucet. The water was still running. So what we need to do is fix that first before you start cleaning up, or you're just going to be like a hamster running on a wheel. You're just going to have more duplicates created while you're fixing it. So let's hop on over and talk through some integration stuff. Let's see. So share screen. Here we go. Okay. So before we actually look at how to manage duplicates and where that is in the HubSpot Salesforce integration, we're going to talk through how companies and contacts get created in HubSpot and Salesforce and where that can get deduplicated. So for this first scenario, we have a contact and account that we created in Salesforce and we synced it down to HubSpot. The contact, Stephen Ryan, and the company, PIC, were created in Salesforce and synced down to HubSpot. So you can see those records here. We looked down at Stephen, we can see it was created from offline sources from Salesforce. If you're wondering how I got this view here under filter activity, I just went to form submissions at Salesforce syncs. If you didn't know, you can filter all of your activities down here. So in HubSpot, we can see sync to Salesforce and form submission. Great. So Stephen came in and he submitted a form. So since he was created in Salesforce originally and synced down to HubSpot as a contact, he kept the association with his Salesforce account. The distinction here with contact is in Salesforce, leads do not associate directly with accounts, right? So if you synced a lead down from Salesforce, they're not going to have a Salesforce account that's synced with them and associated. So the important detail here is we had a Salesforce account in contact and synced it down to HubSpot. So this association was created and maintained. So whenever he submitted a form, this association stayed. But if you look at one key thing here on the company, you'll see that we're missing something we talked about before. We're missing the domain. So in Salesforce, when this company was created, there was nothing in the website field, so nothing synced down to HubSpot. So because this association already existed, Steven stayed associated to this company, but the domain's not there. So in the second scenario, Sean Ryan, also working for PIC, came into HubSpot and submitted a form. You can see they were created from direct traffic by submitting this form, right? So let me make sure that you can still see my screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So just to recap, Steve was submitted or created from Salesforce, submitted a form and stayed associated. There was not a website associated to the Salesforce account. And then in this next scenario, Sean was created when they submitted a form. So here you can see that they submitted a form, they were created in HubSpot, and the company over here where domain is has a domain now. But the challenge is you can see this is not the same company as this PIC. This one is capitalized and doesn't have a domain name, and this one is lowercase and has a domain name. So whenever Sean was created, a duplicate company was created in HubSpot, and he was associated with that one. Now, why did this happen? This happened because there was not a domain on that first company. So we didn't have a website in Salesforce. It didn't sync down. So whenever Sean was created by HubSpot, HubSpot looked for a company that had a matching domain name for the email address that Sean submitted, and there wasn't one. So they created a new company. So now let's look at a third scenario. Richard Ryan, also working at PIC, comes into HubSpot, submits a form. You can see they're created from a form, and they're associated with pic.org. But you can see now they're associated with the right PIC. So how did that happen? Well, Richard synced through to Salesforce as a lead. Our sales team saw him and converted him to a contact. And when they did that, they converted him to a contact with an account associated. So whenever that happens, this new contact and account association syncs back to HubSpot. So in HubSpot, we can see they're now associated with the correct Salesforce account, but we still have this duplicate account that's associated with Richard. So to recap, if you create a contact and account in Salesforce and sync it down to HubSpot, that primary connection will stay in place, regardless of what happens next. But if you have other contacts that come into HubSpot from that same company, if it's missing a company domain or a website URL in Salesforce, then they're going to create a new company with the create and associate contact setting turned on. I'll show you how to do this. I turn this off and prevent this in the future. You're going to create a duplicate company and associate all future contacts that come in with that duplicate company. But if they're taken to Salesforce and converted from a lead to a contact and that association is fixed there, it does sync down correctly. So when does this become an issue? Well, let's say PIC is a customer account. So Steven and this PIC that was originally created, this is a customer. So Steven comes in, he's a customer, great, we can keep track of that. We send out a customer newsletter every week. Well, whenever Sean and Richard come in, their also contacts are on our account. They just didn't exist in our CRM before. So they're also customers, but because they're associated with this fake PIC or duplicate PIC, they're not getting our customer newsletter. So Steven and Sean go out to lunch, and Steven's talking about the newsletter that we sent out because it's so great. It's worth talking about over lunch with your coworkers. And Sean's like, I didn't get that. And he's upset. Well, you've created a poor customer experience because you can see that Sean is in here as an MQL, but he's actually a customer. But since he associated with the wrong account, he's not. So there's one scenario. Here's another one. So in this scenario, we have a list of target accounts. So every year, every month, whatever, we upload a list of target accounts that we want our team to go pursue. We want them out in the field, finding contacts, what have you. So when we upload these accounts to Salesforce, we include a website URL, and this syncs down to HubSpot. So we have no contacts associated. We just have an account that does have a website URL that syncs from Salesforce down to HubSpot. Now, when we open this company in HubSpot, you can see it has a domain name. So whenever Tom Walsh, a contact at Walsh Eggs, came and submitted a form, he was created in HubSpot and automatically associated with the correct company, even though he's only being created as a lead in Salesforce. Because again, leads in Salesforce do not associate with accounts. And we can show you this here by opening him in Salesforce. and seeing that he is currently a lead in this account and not a contact. So how did this happen? Even though he's just a lead in Salesforce, he was associated with the correct company in HubSpot because the domain was set and the domain matched his email address. So a way to prevent this is to include the website URL whenever you're importing your Salesforce accounts. So let's talk about how to fix the duplicate issue. So we've identified two different scenarios here. One where we pulled it in from Salesforce and didn't include the domain and it didn't work, and one where it did. So there's a few different ways you can go about fixing this. One is turning off this create and associate companies with contacts setting. So we saw that functionality where contacts were coming in and it was either creating a new company or associating with an existing one that had a domain, right? So this setting is what allows us to do that. If we turn this setting off, and let's say Sean Ryan came in and submitted a form with his email address, but we had this turned off, he would not associate with PIC. There would be no company created for him. He would go into Salesforce as a lead, and there would be no company associated in HubSpot until he was converted to a contact in Salesforce and then associated with an account. If you want HubSpot to work with leads in Salesforce, this setting is the best one to turn off, because once this setting is turned off, we're not creating companies in HubSpot. We are leaving that to the account creation in Salesforce. And some people are like, well, that's annoying. I want there to be companies in HubSpot. And that's fair, but the lead object in Salesforce does not have the ability to have accounts. So if you want HubSpot to work the way Salesforce is working, you won't create an account for them until they're a contact in Salesforce, which typically means you're ready to create an opportunity and work them. In the opportunity-based inquiry model that I talked about, and that's linked on the resources page of the PDF, you would create a contact and a company in HubSpot, leave this setting on, and also create opportunities to then sync to Salesforce, which is a lot smoother integration and it's a smoother UX. So check that out. It's something that we're doing for a lot of teams right now, is moving them from a lead-based to an opportunity-based inquiry model. So check that out. So the first thing I would do to fix this, if I wasn't going to change that, is turn off the create and associate companies with contacts setting. So we're not creating those companies in HubSpot. If you want to do the work and update all of your website URLs on your Salesforce accounts and resync those down to HubSpot, you can leave this setting on if you're confident that you're going to do it cleanly. The other thing that I would do is I would make sure that forms only have contact properties on them. So I was talking to a client last week and they were like, why are we getting all of these like one field for companies created in HubSpot? We have so many duplicate companies. We have that create and associate setting turned off. I don't know how these are being created. And they were being created because the company name field on their forms was a company property. So you can see here that there are contact properties and company properties on the form, right? So the way that you pick these, when you're building a form over on the left, you look for a property and there's contact properties and company properties. Some people also will see ticket properties here, but not in this account. So the issue here is we should be using the contact property company name instead of the company property. If we're using company properties on this form, whenever it's submitted, it's going to create a contact and a company. So if you're having issues with companies being created, remove the fields that are going to create them, right? So if you're having that issue, take a look at your forms that are collecting company name and make sure it's the contact property and not the company property. Okay, now those are the scenarios of how to prevent duplicate records. We want to make sure we have our website URL in the domain name. We want to make sure that it is syncing in the integrations. Let me show you that really quickly. So if you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm having this issue, but we have all of our website URLs filled out, I don't know why this is a challenge. Well, open up the Salesforce integration and look at field mappings for the company object. This is where you're going to see this be an issue. Under company property mappings, you want to search for domain. So here you can see that we have domain name synced with website, right? The standard mapping is going to sync website URL, which is a Salesforce property that will be created when you install the integration, with website URL in Salesforce. That's great. However, this website URL property has nothing to do with HubSpot deduplication. So you want to map your domain name to your website in Salesforce. And that's how you're going to keep that mapping correct. I also have this synced two-way. So if HubSpot updates it, it'll sync to Salesforce. For the native one, you can either keep it syncing to website URL or you can change it to don't sync. And then that won't sync it to the website property and it will just sync it through to this domain name property. So Now that we've talked through that, let's look at how to monitor duplicates. So we talked about prevent, let's talk about monitor. In HubSpot, I love the way that they surface duplicate records for review. Whenever you are in the contact or company screen in HubSpot, you can go to Actions, Manage Duplicates, and it'll open a new screen for you to manage your duplicate records. Here you can see we don't have any duplicates in this contact database, which is great. If you're on this call, you probably haven't seen this in a while, so soak this in for a second. And then on the company section, you can see we have 16 records highlighted. I will say this is helpful if you have a small amount of duplicates in your account. But if you go into your HubSpot account right now and you see the number 2000 next to companies or contacts, that means that you likely have a lot more than 2000 duplicates. So HubSpot will only surface 2000 duplicates at a time. I don't know why, but I would assume just because that's what their limit is in this platform, who knows. But if it shows 2000, you likely have more because it'll only show you 2000 at once. So if you're spinning your wheels and you're solving and say you have 2000 and you solve for 500 in a day and the next day you log in and there's 2000 again, it's because you actually have a lot more and HubSpot's only showing you 2000. And so if you have 2000 or more here, I'm going to recommend you always use a third-party tool so you can actually get the full scope of what's going on here. Anyway, if we look in HubSpot, there's a few key pieces here. First, you can merge contacts in the HubSpot Salesforce integration, but you can't merge companies. If you're using HubSpot without Salesforce, you can easily merge companies as well. But because of how Salesforce accounts are, you can't merge these companies in HubSpot. So what you want to do when you're reviewing your duplicates is figure out what is your duplicate account and what is your master account. The master record is always going to be the one that's syncing to Salesforce and the one that you want to keep. So when I'm looking at companies, the typical duplicate company scenario is there's a company that was created by Salesforce and there was a company that was not and has never been in Salesforce. So what I want to do when I'm identifying duplicate companies is look for the one that has to do with Salesforce and delete the one that doesn't. So the easiest way to do that is to go to your Manage Duplicates screen and click Select Properties to Review. Here you want to make sure that the Salesforce account ID and the last Salesforce sync time is showing. I also like to include the source data and the number of associated contacts when I'm reviewing these companies. I'll show you why. If we go to this first one and click Review, we can see two different sets of data for these companies. One of these was created in March of this year and one was created in October. So this one was created sooner. However, this is the one that has a Salesforce account ID. So in this example, we'd want to get rid of this one. So the way that you would manually do this in HubSpot is you would open this company record that's a duplicate and you would delete it because you can't merge it, so you would delete it. If you want to bring over any key data from that company, you would copy and paste it or download attachments and re-download it to this master. Yeah, this sounds pretty wild, and this is legitimately the way you do it manually. So if you have a handful of companies, this is easy enough to do here. But if you have more, I am going to recommend that you use InCycle. Also, this is not doing anything in Salesforce when you do this, because if you look at these two records, one of them has a Salesforce account and one of them doesn't. So in this example, I would again delete this one because it's not helpful. Now you might be saying, what if the number of associated contacts for this one that's a duplicate is not 0? What if I actually have 10 associated contacts on the one that's not a duplicate, or the one that needs to be deleted, and none on the one that's actually from Salesforce? Well, the solution for that is going to be found in our resources on the PDF, which again is in the comments to download. So the way that you do that is using a workflow in HubSpot, leveraging the app Associate by Happily. So this has been an awesome solution that we've recently developed where you'll essentially enroll contacts that are associated to companies that do not have a Salesforce ID. So all the contacts that were associated to this would be enrolled in the workflow. And then that workflow using Associate takes the Salesforce account ID on the contact that it's associated to in Salesforce, and then the Salesforce account ID that's on this company and says, hey, these should be associated, and it associates them there. And then you can go and just bulk delete all the companies that don't have a Salesforce ID. So for companies, that will save you a ton of time if you just go and reassociate them. I think the app's like $100 a month maybe, and you can do it on a month-to-month basis. But it's something that I like to keep in tune with the integration. So that's Associate by Happily. Again, link is in the resources. So that's company management. Manually, you would manage it under manage duplicates. Contacts, you would do the same thing, but you can merge it in HubSpot. You would just want to look for the one that is still in sync with Salesforce. Now, once we've turned off the create and associate with contacts with companies, we've fixed our forms, we're confident that we're done creating the problem. This is the third-party tool that I would recommend. I'm not getting any like kickbacks or commission on this. This is just what I use as a consultant. So we use InCycle to deduplicate HubSpot companies and Salesforce accounts, as well as contacts and leads. So in the PDF that I linked, there's a webinar for InCycle that I did. It's essentially, it's 11-minute video showing you point and click. Here is how you actually use InCycle. So you can open that up, watch it on your own time, showing you how to do this for companies and contacts. So check that out. The main reason that this works is you can do it for both. So you can go through Salesforce and define your duplicate rules and say, okay, this is going to be the master record, merge all of this, convert leads into this master contact, merge other contacts into this master contact. And then in HubSpot, we're also going to indicate what the master contact is. So when we go to write our deduplication rules for HubSpot, it will remember that from Salesforce and make sure that master record stays in sync. So that video, again, 11 minutes, will walk you through start to finish how to use InCycle for this. InCycle is a fairly affordable platform. And again, if you're just going to clean it up for a month, you can just pay for 1 month, use it, get rid of it. Again, it's pretty affordable. So highly, highly, highly recommend InCycle as someone who has spent probably thousands of hours of their life manually deduplicating. Use InCycle. It can really change things for you. One more thing before I answer questions. If any questions have come up, go ahead and put them in the questions tab. So I'll be getting there right after I go through this. So ask them now so I can get to them in probably 2 or 3 minutes. So finally, want to see how to see duplicates in Salesforce. Let's say you're more of a Salesforce-minded person. You don't want to log into HubSpot. That's great. There is not a native duplicate report in Salesforce. It has to be created. So this is a custom duplicate report in Salesforce. There, again, in the resources thing, there's a link to our guide that shows you, or our blog that shows you step-by-step how to create one of these. But essentially, this is a contact report showing duplicate contacts. So let's see, we have Lauren Ryan here. There's duplicate record items. We click into that. We click into the duplicate record set and then related. And we can see these 3 records of Lauren Ryan are duplicates. And from here, you can click into them, open them up, and you'll find different duplicate records in Salesforce for one person. The challenge is you can't easily deduplicate from this. So it's pretty easy to see how this is a clunkier solution to HubSpot's duplicate management. I know there's like Salesforce versus HubSpot. That's not what I'm getting into here, but you can see that this is a much clunkier UX for managing duplicates and how to do that. My favorite way to look at duplicates in Salesforce is more how a salesperson would see it. If I opened this lead up in Salesforce as a salesperson or a rep or just an admin that's using Salesforce, if it will open, it looks like it's frozen. Okay. There we go. If I open it up, it'll pop up and say duplicates exist for this lead, view duplicates, and then you can choose here if you're going to merge. So again, duplicate management in Salesforce is not your best option. So it would go InCycle is your best option, managing it manually in HubSpot is number 2, and then number 3 is this process in Salesforce. But all of them are outlined in the resources section, so check that out. Okay, I'm going to hop over to questions real quick. Let's see, over in the chat. Alrighty. Whew, okay, thanks everyone for being super active in the chat. Okay, do we ever recommend people to not use leads at all in Salesforce and just use contacts? Yes, 100%. I recommend using opportunities. So what we do is we create an earlier stage opportunity. So let's say we want to track MQLs. The first stage of opportunity is going to be lead or MQL. So whenever you would create a lead in Salesforce, you actually create an opportunity. And then you can use that to sync to Salesforce. The reason that's beneficial is 1, you don't run into this duplicate issue. 2, your sales team gets to manage opportunities the same regardless of what part of the pipeline they're in. So if they're managing brand new leads or if they're managing renewals, the process is the same, which makes it easy for upward growth of your organization. So let's say you're a BDR that you want to move to an account executive. If the process is the same, it helps that internal growth. It also makes it easier to train. There's a lot of benefits there. So Yes, and that blog is linked in the resources. Let's see. Yes, they'll be reporting. How do you recommend merging records? If you have two companies with similar domains or something like that and goes to the same place but should be the same company, I recommend choosing the master domain and merging that in Salesforce. So here are the two accounts. We merge the master account, and then you go through HubSpot and you would delete the duplicate company. The issue that we didn't talk about today that's going to affect a lot of people, which there's always a caveat, is if you work in the educational space or you work with governments. So let's say that you worked with, I don't know, the Utah Department of Health or something, and there was three different things. There are three different branches of government that you're working with, but all of their websites have the same primary domain. So it might be health.utah.gov or education.utah.gov. But HubSpot looks at that root domain, which is utah.gov, as the domain it's going to associate with. So you're not going to want to use automatic association for anything in any circumstance, because you might have three separate accounts, like Department of Education, Department of Health, Department of whatever. And so whenever you go through, you don't want to auto associate those because they are completely different departments, right? So you're going to want to turn off the create and associate, sync them through to Salesforce as leads, and wait for your sales rep to manually review them and put them to a specific account. In those specific instances, you never want to be creating companies in HubSpot because it gets way too complex, unless you're using HubSpot on your own. So just a caveat, all of this applies to when HubSpot and Salesforce are integrated. The way I would manage this in one or the other, if they weren't integrated, is probably different, just to note. Okay. I frequently had sync errors from the integration that says a HubSpot contact is a duplicate of a Salesforce account. When I dig into it, it turns out that the individual isn't in Salesforce as a lead or contact, and I have to manually create the lead to resolve this error. Do you know what causes this? Let me think about that one real quick. HubSpot. So in this instance, it sounds like potentially you're using person accounts, maybe. Dylan, if you're still on here, if you want to book time with me, I would love to talk to you about this one, because there's a few different reasons that would be happening. So go to our website and book time, or download the PDF and book time. I would love to chat with you about that. Because the reason that might be happening is you maybe have a converted lead or a deleted lead that's still showing in the integration, or you might have something else that's hidden in your Salesforce settings. Or one other thing that can happen is if you're using Salesforce Selective Sync. We didn't talk about this at all because it's kind of like duplicates level 3. If you're using Selective Sync, which actually our next training session is about, but Selective Sync means that you've set specific permissions for a user in Salesforce, and that's the user connecting Salesforce and HubSpot. If that user does not have full visibility to everything in Salesforce, it can show like, hey, there's an issue creating this in Salesforce, but we don't know why. And that's because that Selective Sync is like over configured to where it's hiding records it shouldn't from HubSpot. And so it's like secret issues as far as the integration user is concerned, because things are hidden from them by permissions. So again, Dylan, book time with me. I want to talk about that. Let's see. Matthew, we are about to use the third-party tool you recommended to dedupe both Salesforce and HubSpot accounts and companies at the same time. Are there best practices you would recommend when using this platform? Absolutely. Download that PDF and watch the Incycle webinar. Again, it's 11 minutes. And by webinar, I mean we took a video from the course that we did and put it behind a form as a standalone webinar. So it's very instructional. It's point and click. It tells you how to use Incycle. But best practices, just at the top of my head, is to deduplicate in Salesforce first. So run your accounts, contacts, and leads duplicate rules in Salesforce, and then do HubSpot. So Salesforce first, down to HubSpot. I always treat Salesforce as the primary CRM when it's integrated with HubSpot, because that's how the HubSpot integration was designed to treat it. That's how they built the integration. Salesforce is the master and HubSpot is just secondary. So watch that webinar. David, you mentioned not merging the companies in HubSpot, rather deleting them. What happens if you merge them in HubSpot instead of deleting? Meaning you merge the company with no Salesforce account ID into the company that has no company ID. Dylan, thanks for answering that one. You can't. There is no merging. So if you try to merge the companies, you can't do that when the integration is installed. That is something that us HubSpotters love about using HubSpot without the integration, is you can just merge those companies. The reason you can't is whenever you're integrated with Salesforce, the backend of HubSpot kind of looks at the Salesforce account ID as a way of deduplication too, but it's kind of like a low-key thing because the main thing they look at is the domain. So You don't allow merging for accounts. The reason is technical, but let's see, have a full HubSpot stack now with Salesforce integration. Well, all right, there you go, David. You just can't merge. But yeah, when you're using HubSpot, having the merge company thing is very helpful. Let's see. All right, we have 5 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions they want to throw in the chat? Again, a recording will be sent out. Want to remind you to download the slides if you didn't already, so you can access that with all of the links. Also, plug here to enroll in our course. We're updating the course and relaunching it next year as a paid offering. So if you want to get in for free with what we have now, you need to register for that now. You can do that via our website or in the link in the PDF. I'm trying to think if there's any other last minute tips, but yeah, I would say that now that you have this information, if you have clients, go ahead and look in their account today, see if they have duplicates, look at your own account. And of course, if you need help with this, like, feel free to reach out. What most clients will do with us, just so you know, we don't typically come in and handle all of the deduplication because it's really expensive. Typically when people outsource to us, there's tens of thousands of duplicate records. And so some people will have us do that, but sometimes it's too expensive. And so what people will do is sometimes pay for one-on-one training on how to deduplicate records and how to manage this. And so I'll come in and do maybe 100 deduplicates for them with their team, and then kind of send them on their way. This is how you use InCycle. This is how you do this. So we'll set them up. Okay, David, can you recap when you'd recommend to use the create and associate companies with contacts? For sure. So if you are not using Salesforce, always. If you're not using Salesforce or another third-party CRM and you're just using HubSpot, leave it on. It's a great tool. So Coastal Consulting, we just use HubSpot as our CRM, our marketing tool, everything. I have it on. I think it's awesome. However, if you are using HubSpot and you have that EDU issue, like you pointed out, EDU or Gov, it may not work for you. Reason being is it will pull everything from that root domain. So if you're using education or Gov, you'll need to look at it and see how it behaves with your account, because likely you will have a parent account and then attribute those people to child accounts. Typically what I've seen clients do in the government or education space is they have someone that owns a territory or owns a specific account. And so when new leads come into their account, they say, okay, yes, this belongs to the parent account, or no, I'm going to put this on a child account. In HubSpot or Salesforce, anything that you have specific logic for can be built out, but the logic has to be consistent. So if you know this is always a set of parameters and this is what happens with it, then you can automate it using custom code or a Salesforce flow or whatever. So that's, sorry, I got distracted looking at this. So I would assign someone to be in charge of owning it and making sure that it's done correctly. And so that manual is part of it. But if you have something where you're like, hey, this is always the case, these are always the rules. If it says XYZ, this is always what we do. You can use a custom code action in HubSpot using Operations Hub, or you can build a flow in Salesforce. If you're using Salesforce, there are ways to get around that. Also, if you're having association issues in HubSpot, please check out Associate by Happily. If you know Max Cohen, that's what he's promoting now, and it's awesome. So check that out. We love using that app. You can try it for free too, which is helpful. And if you're just using contacts in Salesforce, yes, you can use the create and associate companies. However, I would not turn that on until you have audited your accounts and make sure that you have a domain name in HubSpot for all of them. Because if you have not audited it, you do not have a domain name, then you will create duplicates and you will be very upset with yourself. So I'm okay with using it if you have made it a best practice or a standard practice to have website URL collected on your accounts and you've updated all of your HubSpot accounts. So I have a recommendation on which level to use for InCycle. The level I recommend is either 2 or business. Typically I go for business, but sometimes you can make 2 work, but I prefer the business level whenever I'm doing this for clients. Let's see, Gov, EDU issue not become a problem if you have multiple domains in the HubSpot profile. Yes, that can become a problem. If you are using parent and child accounts, that's usually the best way to deal with it. But again, with that logic, HubSpot doesn't necessarily have that built in. So something to think about there. And yes, it is weird for the Salesforce sync. If you have multiple domains, then that's not going to sync through, because the website URL property in HubSpot is not a multi-collect property. Or in Salesforce, like HubSpot, you can have multiple there, like multiple emails. But in Salesforce, the email and website URL is just a single line text property. So it doesn't collect multiple like in HubSpot. The edu.gov issue, that's going to be an issue that you're going to need to probably work with a partner to solve, or a highly technical resource internally. Most platforms are designed for certain things, and it's not that HubSpot doesn't work for education or government. Actually, most of our clients are education and government, but there are scenarios where it's like, okay, we need to build this out a little bit specially, or have custom code, or use apps like Associate. So anyway, that is our time. If you want help, please reach out. I am happy to help with this issue or anything around the HubSpot Salesforce integration. And again, thank you for joining. Thanks, Kelly. Dwight says hi too. Kind of, he's asleep. But thank you all, and check out our next session. And I'm going to be sending out a feedback survey, so please submit that to let me know how we did. And I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks, y'all.